process. The first step in the process is to write down the situation. That's what we do. The first step is write down the situation. The situation, what happened, where, when, with whom, and how. And this can help us diffuse negative emotions and associations. For example, a bad interview, a negative presentation that didn't go as well as you'd like it to go, a sporting events, things in the past, things you've got coming up in the future. You want to reassociate to certain things you've got coming up in the future, like interviews, presentations, or you could even future pace. What I did with a woman I worked with once, she had a wedding coming up and we did in vivo. We imagined her at the wedding. Now, the wedding was her daughter's wedding. You don't think, what's the big deal? For her it was. For her husband or her ex-husband, she'd been married for 40 years, divorced for 2 years, was going to be there with new partner. And she felt very apprehensive and nervous and anxious. And we imagined it in vivo and in the process. So you can use past and you can use and do in vivo future events. And that's the first step. Identify situation. Situation, what happened, could have been the interview, didn't go well, the presentation, the sporting event, or the in vivo, where you imagine yourself in that situation, like in the case of the woman, being at the wedding, her ex-husband there with the new partner, the daughter there, and we created an in vivo scenario. So that's the first step, the situation. And you might want to follow the technique as you go along. And I use a lot of my clients in coaching to help them diffuse and build emotional resilience. The second step is we then go to the emotions. We rate the emotions from 1 to 100, 100 being high. So we ask the person, what emotion do you feel when you recall the events? You do in vivo or some role play. Alternatively, in the case of the woman who had the wedding and we imagine her being there, what emotion did you feel and how intense? So I use a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being high. The reason I use that is because how do you quantify? How can you quantify? And it's one way to quantify and gauge we're improving, because we're going to re-rate the emotion. Now, it's not like running a race. If you run 100 meters and you run 100 meters in 10 seconds, you can time that on the watch. And it is what it is. You're relying on the person. You're relying on your acuity to read the person. You're relying on them being open and honest. You're relying on being in touch with their own emotion, understanding the situation. So it's a useful tool to have. And for me, it's a useful guidance. The outcome is important. Obviously, the outcome is key. You have a goal in mind. The goal might be to go to the interview again, presentation again, to go to the wedding. That's the goal, really. This gives you some guidance in terms of moving forward. So that's the second step of the process. Okay, the third step of the process, the third step is physical. Okay, mind and body being one system. So physical sensations is the first step. Notice where you feel the sensations in the body. And mind and body being one, and it'll be like when you're nervous to do an exam, you need to go to the toilet for a wee, or in some situations you're really stressed, you have a bit of a rash breakout. So we know mind and body are connected, and what you do is explore the physical sensations. So the person reflects on that interview that went horribly wrong in their own mind, and you talk about where do you feel it, if they feel the anxiety, or whether they feel that negative emotion or feeling, if they're reflecting on the presentation, whether they feel it. In the case of the one I was working with a wedding, she felt it here in the tummy, around the solar plexus. And what I would do then is I'd get her to, and perhaps you'd like to have a go and think of a negative emotion that you have, mildly negative, could be slight anxiety, nervousness, just mild, nothing major, and perhaps you'd like to have a go and close your eyes, if you're comfortable closing your eyes. And what I do with this part of it is I get the person to breathe deeper, and as they breathe deeper through their tummy, it calms the fight, flight, freeze response, the sympathetic nervous system, the part of the nervous system that kicks in when you're in danger. A bit like if you saw a vicious dog across the other side of the street, your heart would go up, cortisol would be released, and to calm that down, the parasympathetic nervous system, we can breathe deeper. That lets the body know everything's okay. And they can practice that breathing as well, by the way, and I've done videos on breathing too. And as the person breathes, as you breathe, naturally, normally, it will be deeper, and the speech muscles relaxed, and the heart rate goes down. You can disassociate from the feeling, and you can imagine wherever that feeling is. Let's say the feeling's in the tummy. Imagine disassociating from that feeling, pushing it away, draining the colours, turning any sounds down, just letting it go and pushing it away. And as you let it go, you turn the sounds down, you drain any colours, you let the feelings disintegrate into the atmosphere, and breathe them out and just breathe naturally and normally. So that's the third part of the process, to get a sense of control of the person's muscle energy regulation. And that's quite useful to do that, and you can do that by locating where the emotion is, and then you can disassociate from the emotion. A bit like if you put bad food in the fridge. If you put bad food in the fridge, what's to do with the rest of the food? Exactly, it contaminates it potentially. If you get it out, it's out there. So we want to get it out of the system. We want to get and disassociate from that unresourceful state, get it out of the system and go from there. So that's the third step in the process. The fourth step in the process, is to look at the unhelpful thoughts, and any images. And I'd ask the person what's gone through your mind. We can communicate with that person what went through their mind, what images did they see, thoughts, memories, sounds, feelings. What did the situation mean to you? What are you responding to? What's the best, worst, most realistic situation? So in the case of an interview example, the person may have seen themselves failing. They may have seen the person doing the interview being 10 foot tall. They may have seen themselves spiraling into not getting a job, not paying bills, and living on the street. They might be thinking failure, rejection. All these things might be going through their mind they're responding to. So they could be catastrophizing the situation, personalizing it, and make it more than what it is. It is what it is. If that's what it means to that person, then it is what it is to that person. Yet, more often than not, we tend to hypothesize and think worst case scenario. The brain always looking for threats. A bit like if you go to 10 stores at Christmas time and 9 serve you and they're really nice to you and give you a good deal and look after you. If one of them shortchanges you and they're very abrupt with you, the one you go home and talk to your partner about generally is going to be the one that shortchanges you. So we want to get a sense of perspective about the situation and talk about the worst scenario, the best scenario. So the worst scenario is don't get a job, go for another job. You lost a job in the past, you get a new job. The best scenario is, well, actually, you know what, I go into a far better job than the one I've applied for. The most realistic scenario is you'll find some work. Eventually, it might not be the work you want at the time, but you'll get back on your feet and you'll go forward. And for the case of the woman I mentioned about the wedding, so in her mind, she saw her ex-husband happy with new partner. She personalised it, took it personal. How can you do this to me? Blamed herself. What's something I did? Could I have done something better? And she's going through a range of emotions and feelings: guilt, anger, frustration. And that's okay. It's natural and normal to feel that way and go through that. We want to get a sense of perspective about that. And we can record, rationalise, and start restructuring the thought process by getting it out there, disassociating from the situation and getting a sense of perspective. Now, what does it mean? And you can use questions like in NLP, we've got the meta model, you've got Socratic questioning to chunk down. Because the meaning we give it, and nothing has any meaning other than the meaning we give it in life in general. And sometimes we have an illusion of the way things should go, an expectation. We don't meet the expectation, we become disappointed. And we know in life we won't always meet expectation. I'm not saying what's right or wrong, I'm not condoning, I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that sometimes in life we misinterpret or misunderstand the situation. And if we at least see it for what it is, we can start to move forward. Acceptance is not resignation. It's accepting the situation what it is, drawing out a line, and moving forward. And once we've done that and got down to the element, the fifth step is quite useful. And the fifth step is the alternative way of seeing it. So change your perspective, change your world. So a more balanced way of seeing the situation. You can say to the person, okay, stop and take a breath, and is it fact or opinion? So whatever they tell you that they're thinking at a certain point, like I failed, I'll never get a job again, I'll never find a relationship again, no one will ever love me, I'm worthless, whatever beliefs they have about the event, about the situation, how it's impacting their behavior, their emotion, physiology, this step here can really help us because you can stop and see it for what it is. See it for what it is. And you can do that by the following questions. You can say, okay, what would someone else say about that? What would someone else that you admire say about you not getting that job? Or what would they say about them not getting a job? And we know a lot of people who failed. Many successful business people have failed loads of times. Many people, failed many times, but they've got up and gone again. And you would say, what would they say about situation? There's a presentation, or anything for that matter, what would they say? In the case of this woman, it was what would someone else say that she admired about situation? She thought, well, the person that she admired would say, well, they had a similar situation themselves, and they got up and they got a new lease of life. That's not undermining the person, it is what it is, and no doubt it's not easy, but the only issue is if you stay where you are, you suffer as a result. The key is to move forward, get out of rumination, to get unstuck and move forward. Because the only person who's going to suffer if you're stuck in that position you're in is yourself. So for her to reflect and see it differently, what would someone else think about the situation? And what you could also do is it fact opinion? There's a fine line between fact opinion. Opinion, if I measure a room that's 10 meters with a tape measure and it comes back as being 10 meters, well, it is what it is. It's fact as we know it in the world today. If we say it's a long way away, it's an opinion. It might be a long way away for someone who's got a medical condition. It might be a short distance for someone who's got who's fit and healthy at that point in their life. So there's a sort of grey area where beliefs are concerned. So for me, one thing you say to the person is, what would someone else say about the situation? And also, how would you advise someone else? Because we're good at giving advice, yet we don't take our own advice. And what I would say is the big picture, and how would you advise someone else who's not got an interview, not got the job? How would you advise someone else who's not performed well in the presentation? How would you advise someone else who has to go to a wedding, or doesn't have to go, but really wants to go to a wedding where the ex-husband's going to be their new partner? What advice would you give someone else? And this really helped the woman because she realised that what she could do as part of other interventions that I worked with her on, like NLP anchoring and visualizing rehearsal, she also brought someone with her to externalize it, to talk to as well, and that helped us sort of get some clarity. We normalize the situation because the brain's working well, the brain is very implicit, yet ultimately she really wanted to go to be there for her daughter, and that was a useful way. How would you advise someone else? And look at the big picture, look at the big picture, because sometimes we get stuck in our own little world and don't look at the big picture. And this really helped that woman I was working with, because basically what she would do is go on and she changed and transformed her life in more ways than one. And sometimes our adversity becomes a blessing. That's not undermining people. We've all been through stuff. You have, I have, and many people have. But what I'm suggesting is sometimes you lose a job, you go into a better job. You fail at an interview, you go into something different. You break up in a relationship and you end up in a better situation. You rediscover yourself, reinvent yourself. You find someone more compatible to you at the specific time. Life being a journey, it's a learning experience, and that's the fifth step. And then what you can do at the end, really, which is quite useful, and in the sixth step, what's quite useful to do is to re-rate the emotion from 1 to 100%. So in the beginning, if the person rates it being 100%, re-rate the emotion to say 50% or even 90%. Going down success, if they stay where they are, then you probe a bit more. The chances are they'll go down, and if they don't go down completely, then get them to connect to the emotion, to recognize it, accept it's there, not fight it, let it pass, the issue will pass, investigate it, talk to the emotion, what's it communicate, what's it trying to say to that person, and look at new ways of looking at it. So it's feedback for you, and certainly in the case of the person I was working with the wedding situation, that scenario, for her, she went down enough to be able to do other interventions to help her move the life forward, not just go to the wedding. But equally, I've worked with people with interviews, presentations, and they've gone down completely to a level where they've been able to do the process, the behavior more effectively. On a final one, you could say, what's the response that you can do? So as a result of bringing that emotion down, what can you do different that you weren't doing before? So for the woman, it was to go to the wedding, and for some people it might be go back to an interview. For some people it might be prepare for the interview. So we don't have to jump a building. We don't have to jump one big bound on the building. It can be just getting back on the horse and taking steps forward. We're not all looking always to leave that building in a single bound. Sometimes just sort of go up in increments, and we don't really want to push the person what they can tolerate. It's not sink or swim. We don't take 5 steps forward, 10 back. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps forward, maybe 1 back, a couple of steps forward, and get life back. And certainly in situations with some people, they're going to take the big leap forward and they're really well on the way. But we've got to appreciate that for the most part, we can facilitate the person through experiential processes and giving them stuff that they can work on gradually to get themselves back to where they want to get to. And then you can assess the consequences. So in the case of the woman, the consequences of going to the wedding, there were a lot of positive consequences. There were some negative ones in the way she felt and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, you can assess the consequences. And the same applies for the interview, the consequences of going back for another interview, going for a presentation, and explore them. And any feedback you've got is invaluable because you're going to get feedback, and every feedback you can talk about the feedback. So if the person says, well, actually, you know what if I fail again? As a consequence, then you can say, okay, if you fail again, if you see it as failure, if you see it as feedback, it could be that you improve certain areas, it could be that you go for a different job, it could be you do something different. So then you can look at options, alternatives. You can present the person with ideas and bounce ideas, options, alternatives, and the more alternatives you've got, the more options you've got, the better chance you're placed to go forward and to move forward. So this technique's not for everybody, and certainly email me, and certainly that I wouldn't, you use it as part of your protocol, use it as part of your existing skill set. So every case is formulation. This is purely for educational purposes only. I'm not suggesting or implying you do this to your clients or patients. It's an educational process. I don't know where they are or what you do. Each case is based on an independent formulation, yet it's a useful tool to learn, and you can take whatever's right for you based on your remit. So whatever you do professionally, you can use an extension to help the people that you're working with go from A to B, providing it's within the realms of your profession and safeguarding and providing it fits into the integrity of the organisations you work with. But it's quite a useful technique, and I've used it for a long time, and I also give people the hand up to work on it too. Equally, email me. Do email me if you want a copy of the process in a structured way. I'm more than happy to email it to you. Email me on info@excelvenlp.com, info@excelvenlp.com. That's info@excelvenlp.com. The video will be uploaded. You can watch it again as often as you like to. You can email me if you've got any questions, comments, otherwise, and give us some feedback. And it's quite a useful technique to use for me. Okay, so live with passion.